Hey folks, welcome back to Only the Best Fantasy Novels. My name is Robin, and today I want to talk about one of the most odd families I've read in fantasy to date, and that is the Leoridan family. And the specific entry that covers them, The Belly of the Bow. So this is the second book in the Fencer trilogy by K.J. Parker, and this book is where things get really, really unhinged. Anyway, what is this book about? So Pyramidea has fallen, and the cast that we followed in the first book have all gone their separate ways. Um, the survivors are largely split among Skona, which is a island nation that's pretty much led by the Leoridan Bank, namely Bardis' sister and his brother Cargus. And then the other location of note is Shastel, which is pretty much like a corrupted communist collective. And then finally, the remaining survivors are in the island, which is another nation that plays a tangential part through events as we saw in the first book. Um, but yeah, so war is on the horizon because there's this big group of peasants out there working farmland, and it's a war between Scone and Shastel to settle once and for all who gets the privilege of exploiting these peasants via the banking system. So yeah, that's the premise for this whole book. And one thing I did note, one thing I have to start right off the bat to saying is that this book is both has significant differences and significant similarities to Colors in the Steel. So, like every KJ Parker book I've read so far, they he picks a topic and he just drills really deep into it, and it becomes like a core component of the book. In Colors in the Steel, it was sword forging and siege machines. In this one, we get bow making. Um, and that's just one similarity. Another similarity is just the way the overall book is kind of structured, the basic premise. Like there's a war between two rival nations, and a Leoridan brother is at the head of the defense. And where things start to deviate is that in this case, the Leoridan brother who's at the head of the defense is Gorgeous, and yeah, things really start to get hairy from there. Um, but like the real way that, as much as like it has these similarities to the first book, the real way that things really start to deviate is in just like the character journeys that we follow throughout this book. Like we over the course of this book, we find Bardus essentially trying to make a way in trying to make a way of living on Skona. He kind of has his head in the sand to an extent, in that he's trying to be all independent and all of that, while at the same time grudgingly and grudgingly accepting what he knows as the largest of his siblings that he wants no truck with. But over the course of this novel, like he goes through some serious stuff. Like he's confronted with some of the truths about his past. Some of his core dreams, his core ideals are challenged and tested and broken in like really really messed up ways. And we find out more about him in terms of just not just the extent that he goes to for the people that he cares about, but also how severe failing that is for him. And like just off of just that entire thing by itself would have been messed up before we even get to how his particular story ends in this book. Um, the other character that we follow is Gorgeous, who is like the brother who played a minor yet extremely significant role in Colors in the Steel. In this book, we find out more about him. We find out more about what drives him, and we see what happens when he is placed theoretically in the same position as Bardus, how he handles things, how his approaches, and as a result, how the outcomes are different. And so there's that story going on, and then there's Niesa, who once again plays. She given how much we've heard spoken of her throughout these books, like she plays a shockingly very hands-off role on everything, um, but she does play a very significant one. Like she proves to be like the glue that kind of ties everyone together, and in just like these strange and fascinating ways. And it's through her POV that we learn a lot more about the background machinations of this world. So it's like really interesting stuff. Like the Lyrians are very much at the epicenter of a lot of things that are happening, and in true KJ Parker style, like they're extremely competent at what they do, which unfortunately can't be said for everyone in the family, but that's another story entirely. In addition to these three core characters, we have recurring faces from the previous book, and they go through their own stuff. They like, it's interesting to see the way that the new roles that allies take on and these kind of things. Like that was kind of fun to read in and of itself, and just the way that life moves on for people in general. Like I mentioned in my video on Colors in the Steel, like KJ Parker just excels at creating like a type of low fantasy that is not gritty, it's not grimdark or anything. It's very realistic, and in addition to that, it's not like this whole agrocentric kind of feudal society kind of thing. Like there's technology, there's the development of complex social systems and structures and these kind of things, and he does a good job of creating very real people to inhabit these systems, these locations, and we see the roles that are available and that come into play for mainly for these minor characters. A lot of questions get that cropped up in the first book. Some of the stories continue to unfold in this one. They do lead to some more questions, but at the same time, like there's a lot of things with KJ Park books, like you kind of have to take with a grain of salt, and somehow by the end it just works. It just comes together in like really fascinating ways, and that's kind of a mishmash of like what I meant when I talk about these characters, and just the way they interact over the course of this story and all of that. Like I mentioned, in terms of like just plotting, it feels very similar to the first book, in that you have like overall a very similar type of story being told with very different circumstances, very different outcomes, and it's very similar to the first book. You have the inclusion of these random characters and these random throwaway POVs, and just a lot of strange, twisty stories that happen in between the overarching issue, and it just comes together really well. It kind of amalgamates into something that was entertaining to read in its own way. And KJ Parker, he really doesn't pull any punches. Like he in this book, he really drilled down into the nitty gritty of a particular topic, in this case bow making, and then he uses it to deliver one of the most vicious gut punches I've ever read in any book. Like the ending of this book is absolutely demented. It's absolutely deranged. It's one of the craziest things I've ever read. Like it underscores how messed up the Leoridan family is, their relationships and these kind of things. Like it's just brilliantly done. Like I already decided quite a while back that I need to read everything KJ Parker, but this book sealed the deal and made it an absolute hardcore fact that I have to read everything he's written that I can get my hands on next year. 2025 cannot pass me with a KJ Parker book unread once I can help it. Like it's amazing. Like I love that he, if I had to like think of like a comparison for him for any other author over there, he does fantasy similar to GDK in that he has like a shared world, but there's not much magic to it, if at all, if there's any at all. He does a great low fantasy vibe, similar, and just a way of using his prose to do creative and interesting things, similar to someone like Joe Abercrombie. But the difference is that his social structures, like they exceed, they're much more advanced than anything you would see in a typical fantasy book. So there's that aspect to it, and the way he drills down into particular topics, and just goes to a level of detail that somehow, like, it can feel, at times it can feel almost like reading a textbook, but somehow it's just baked into the story in such a way that it really works. Like, the only comparison I can think of to that is Miles Cameron's the Traitor Sun cycle, and just the way Miles Cameron incorporates armor in that series. Like, if you've read that series, you know to the level of detail and extent what I'm talking about, and the way that it plays a part in the story, and that's kind of what KJ Parker does with specific topics, and it just works. It just works. Like, I enjoyed this. Throughout the course of the book, I enjoyed it as much as I did Colors in the Steel, but by the end, I was just completely and utterly blown away. Completely and utterly. Like, this is easily going to be in my top 10 books of this year with the way this ends. Yeah, I think that's all I really have to say about The Belly of the Bow. A really crazy series. And I like KJ Parker. Obviously, writing is Tom Holt. He had a lot of writing experience before he even published his book. But given this is already KJ Parker, and he was still, quote unquote, finding his voice as KJ Parker, like, this is nuts. This is absolutely nuts, and I look forward to see how he's evolved as time has gone. Yeah, that's pretty much all I have to say about this. If you've made it this far into the video, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.